Now, this week, Donald Trump's personal lawyer, John Dowd, announced that, quote, the president cannot obstruct justice because he is the chief law enforcement officer. And that statement has left many people scratching their heads and is also the topic of this week's episode of the Washington Post podcast series, Can He Do That? Host Allison Michaels joins me now from Washington. Allison, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
We're going to focus on this particular nugget because it's been the topic of a lot of conversation. Is the president above the law as the chief executive officer of the country?
So I talked to many legal experts about this, and it's important to note that there are different positions. I think one can use common sense to assume that, in fact, the president should not be above the law. We do not have a king in the United States. We, of course, have a president. However, there is some room for legal nuance. So, for example, a president may have the power to, in fact, obstruct justice, or rather, the power to do things that impede an investigation, but it really comes to whether or not his intent was poor. So, for example, if Trump did interfere in this process, investigation, rather, if Trump did interfere in this investigation, then it's possible that that could be obstruction of justice if, in fact, it came from a place to, impede with bad intent so that himself or members of his administration wouldn't get caught. So at the same time, you have this other perspective, though, that a president in fact, does have the right to do this, and it falls within the legal bounds of what's laid out for the president's responsibilities.
There was a lot of kerfuffle over the tweets that he made last weekend where he, in essence, seemed to admit to obstruction of justice, and then it came out that his lawyer wrote that particular tweet, so I guess that means Trump's absolved. But it was very confusing and convoluted. But at the end of the day, when you talk about intent, how is that proven?
Well, part of that can be proven through the investigation that Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller is leading. So it's possible that in their investigation into whether or not Trump obstructed justice, they're able to find hard evidence that determines what Trump's actual intent was in making these decisions, in asking Director Comey, former FBI Director Comey, not to fire Michael Flynn. So those kinds of things can be determined by Mueller's investigative team. Of course, we've seen things like this come up in the past. We saw this with President Nixon in his articles of impeachment. Obstruction of justice was included in there. Ultimately, he was pardoned by the next president. But, we've seen this come up in the past, so it's not as though a president is fully immune.
Can a president pardon himself?
So this is a question that is actually puzzling some constitutional scholars. It would seem that no, a president can't, in fact, pardon himself, because we would find ourselves in a situation where a president might pardon himself while in office for a crime that he then can't be indicted for following his exit from office. And that would really paralyze us and put us in a state of constitutional crisis. So, it's something that would not be advisable, I think, from the perspective of most legal scholars, but it's certainly not explicitly ruled out within the law.
Allison Michaels, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.